I'd heard rumours that Steve Borthwick might name his England team to face Japan early, and that's exactly what he has done. On the Tuesday, the England 15 is out, so comment down below. What do you make of it? What do you make of this team? Any surprises in there? Did you expect more rotation? I think there's a few different things to take from it, and the big headline, Marcus Smith at fly half. So have your say in the comments section, and whilst you're here, like the video and subscribe to the channel. But this is the team. This is the 23 that Borthwick has gone with. As I say, the headline from this is I think is going to be Marcus Smith at fly half. I'm going to come on to that with Finn Smith on the bench. I think one of the other interesting things from my point of view is it's not all that experimental from Borthwick. I didn't know how he would approach the Japan game. Speaking to other people that are out there covering the tour, they were kind of saying they think that he would go strong, and that looks to be the way of things. So it's 4 changes from the France game, just to dot the I's and cross the T's. 4 changes from the France game, and all of them are enforced. So no Ellis Genge, so Bevan Rodd comes in. No Ollie Chesham, so Chandler Cunningham South comes in. Emmanuel Faye-Waboso is back on the wing in place of Elliot Daly. And then that one I mentioned, Marcus Smith in for George Ford at fly half. So I think this is classic Borthwick in a way. This is no experimental, no chucking guys in for the sake of getting them a cap and starting to give them experience. It is the best team that he thinks is going to do the job against Japan. And that will place England, I suppose, in the best place possible, presuming they are able to get the win, to then take on the All Blacks in a couple of tests as well. Other things to note as well, just in terms of the news lines from this, is Tom Curry on the bench. We didn't exactly know where he would fit into things, but he gets a bench place. But let's run through the team then. I'll start in the front row. Bevan Rodd, Jamie George, Dan Cole. Mix of experience and a mix, I suppose, of trying to get Bevan Rodd a bit more game time. I didn't know exactly how they would approach this. Dan Cole and Joe Marler, I mean, they're on the tour for a reason, even though they're both at points in their careers where we might have expected them to retire from international rugby or start to be rotated out of the team. I think the front row is one of the areas of this England team that we should all keep an eye on, because it is the area for me still with the biggest question mark, in particular the props. Just in terms of the development planning. In Dan Cole and Joe Marler will go for this season. Maybe we'll see them next year as well, but it's going to get to a point fairly soon where they're no longer part of this setup. And then the question is, how strong are your props, particularly from a scrummaging perspective? And I think if you take Marler and Cole out of this current England squad, whilst they've got some other good players there, I think it leaves them a little bit exposed. So the development of Bevan Rodd, I really like him. I think he's a really good player. I think he's been good for Sale. He has had some problems with injuries, I suppose you'd say. So I'm glad to see him there. I'm also interested where this team selection leaves Finn Baxter, because if he's not playing in this game, is he getting a debut off the bench against the All Blacks? Is he more going to be there to gain experience and then we'll see him be given his debut when it comes to the autumn? And in fact, there's a few other players in a similar category. I'll maybe get onto them in a little bit. So I'm pleased with Bevan Rodd. As I say, Dan Cole is still one of England's best scrummagers and Jamie George is the captain. Into the second row, probably what most of us expected, really. Maro Itoje was always going to start and George Martin was the player I had there. I did a video yesterday, actually, on the team I would have selected. Not quite, it wasn't quite this. There's a few changes, but I had Itoje and I had Martin in my second row. And actually, I had the same back row as well. Chandler Cunningham South at 6, Sam Underhill at 7, Ben Earl at 8. Ben Earl, I mean, he's been England's best player over the last year, pretty much. So that makes complete sense. Chandler Cunningham South, I think, has the potential in that 6th position to be a little bit like what Courtney Lawes was for England for a long time. That 6 who's a big ball carrier, he gets around the pitch, he can kind of do a bit of everything. I think his potential, how much he could improve, is really exciting from an England point of view. And then Sam Underhill, when he's on form, is just immense. Brilliant in the Premiership final. And I suppose because of Tom Curry having returned from injury, it made it an easier selection to have Underhill at 7. Tom Curry on the bench, that is an interesting one. I'm still really intrigued into the relationship between Sale and the RFU at the moment. Alex Anderson saying, you pick Tom Curry now and you're taking games off the end of his career. He's had a really serious hip injury. He's only played 30 odd minutes off the bench for Sale this season. Admittedly, he was brilliant in those 30 minutes in the Premiership semi-final, but nonetheless, it does get to a point where I think his minutes have to be managed. My temptation would have been to leave him at home for this tour just because he has played so little rugby. It was such a serious injury. Try and preserve him and get the best out of him maybe on later this year. But he gets an opportunity on the bench. And I suppose the only replacement that I haven't particularly mentioned, well, a couple of them actually. So Charlie Ewels is there. He's had a great season for Bath, hasn't he? It's a bit of a redemption arc actually for Charlie Ewels, because he was part of the England setup under Eddie Jones, was starting to be a more regular face without ever really making his presence felt, without ever you really feeling like that he was a mainstay in the team. He then had injury. He went on loan to South Africa. He's come back in. He's been great for Bath this year, so good on him. And Will Stewart, I would probably put in a similar category to Bevan Rodd, that player that you're expecting to be the starter for England in the front row and has never been quite able to do it. And Theo Dan continues as the deputy to Jamie George. Into the backs, Alex Mitchell starts at 9. He's been England's 9, again, over the last year. I don't think there's too many shocks there. Given the fact that Borthwick hasn't particularly rotated this team and he's gone strong, Mitchell starts. What for me is interesting here is where does it leave Ben Spencer, given that Harry Randall is amongst the replacements? Now, that could just be a fact of Harry Randall has been in camp longer. So therefore, Borthwick's given him the opportunity. But as we look ahead to the All Blacks tests, does that mean Ben Spencer could get an opportunity off the bench against the All Blacks? I don't know. He's one of those players, isn't he? He's been so good for Bath. So many people want to see him be given an opportunity. But you just wonder, I just wonder whether it's going to come or not. Because I think there will be players on this tour who don't get an opportunity. And I think this team selection is a reflection of that. Borthwick is not going to just give everyone an opportunity and give everyone game time. He's picking the best 23 to win the test matches. And that means some players might be on tour over the next few weeks and not actually play. And I just wonder whether Ben Spencer will be one of those. Not because he's not good enough, but just because of the pecking order at the moment, based on this 23, quite where he sits in it. But Mitchell at 9, it's good to see. Marcus Smith at 10. Let's get on to it then. What do you make of it? I've said in all my preview videos, I would have gone for Finn Smith. That's never been anything against Marcus. I mean, I'm really pleased for Marcus. I'm excited for him and I hope that he takes this opportunity. I thought it would be Finn Smith because I felt like his game style would more suit what Borthwick wants out of a 10. In a sense, and in quite a simplistic view of things, he's closer to George Ford than Marcus Smith is. And George Ford has been the starting 10 for England in the Six Nations, so I thought it would be Finn Smith. And Finn Smith's been brilliant. I think he's shown so many different areas of his game, in particular the way in which he's been able to dictate a game from 10. Whereas Marcus's strengths, I think, probably lie elsewhere, but it is Marcus that gets the nod. And I think it's a huge opportunity for him, actually, because as sensational as he has been in the Premiership, I don't think we've ever quite seen that with England. Not entirely his fault there. There was the 10-12 axis with him and Farrell, where you always felt that Farrell was still the dominant voice in that partnership and running that attack. He was then used off the bench almost more as a fullback in the World Cup. Maybe this is the opportunity in the moment for Marcus Smith to show what he can do and why so many people, many of you watching this channel, feel he should have been given the keys to this England attack a long, long time ago. It maybe speaks as well to how England are going to approach this game. In that if you're picking Marcus Smith, what does he do really well? He takes the ball to the line, he goose steps, he tests defences up close. Finn Smith, I think, is maybe a better distributor of the ball. He can find a gap, of course. But maybe England want to inject pace onto this and they want to try and run Japan ragged. And that's why Smith is there at 10. Elsewhere, Ollie Lawrence, Henry Slade in the centres. Probably the combination most people expected. I put Tommy Freeman in the centres in the team I picked just because I wanted to get Ollie Slightholme into my 23. But Lawrence was excellent in the Six Nations, was always going to be 12. And Henry Slade's, having not been part of the World Cup, he has had an excellent season for Exeter. Such a classy player at 13. I still think he's a player that we've never seen the best of him really for England, barring the odd test match. But I've got no problem with him being there. Faye Woboso comes back in, one of the form wingers in England. Freeman, likewise, is pretty established now, maybe you feel, in this England team. And then Furbank. So what we do have there actually is a Northampton presence. Even though fly half is Marcus rather than Finn, Furbank Freeman, Mitchell. Borthwick has spoken about combinations and how important they are to him, and you've got some there in that back line. But no Slightholme. He's another one where you could put into the category of where does he now sit in this England team? Is he going to get opportunities on this tour? In terms of replacements for the backs, I mentioned Harry Randall, we mentioned Finn Smith, he'll come off the bench and have an impact. Tom Roebuck at 23. How many people saw that coming? Now, I really like Tom Roebuck. I love him when I see him for sale. I think he's a good player, but I wouldn't have necessarily expected him to be in there. The one thing I suppose you would say with him over, say, a Slightholme, for example, is Roebuck was part of the training squad ahead of the Six Nations. Didn't play a game, but maybe he has just been involved with the setup more. He understands what's expected of him from England more, and that's part of the reason that he is there. So what do you make of it? I'll leave it there, my kind of general thoughts. It's interesting that England have named their team early. I wondered whether it would be a case of naming it early, getting some of their press duties out of the way so they could avoid any kind of verbal grenades that Eddie Jones might be sending their way, because we know that that is not Steve Borthwick's forte of dealing with them. But I presume they're still going to have press access on Thursday. I think Jamie George will be up. I presume Borthwick as well. I don't actually know. So maybe that theory actually doesn't have too many legs. But England have gone early. This is their team. Not too much rotation. Marcus Smith at fly half. Tom Curry on the bench. What do you make of it? What do you make of this England team? And what does it say to you about where England are heading this summer with those tests against the All Blacks to come? Like the video, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.